Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you guys so much for having me out. I really appreciate it. My name is actually Rochelle, and my goal for this talk today is just to give a general overview of what environment art means, and just not necessarily going into specifics of how to be an environment artist, but kind of what you do day to day. So with that, we'll just get started. Um, I have to click on the screen. There we go. I guess we'll start out with who the heck am I? My name is Ashley. I've been in the industry for 11 years. I'm currently an environment art lead at Bonus XP. It's actually a local studio in Allen. Places I've worked, my first studio was at Gearbox Software. I was there for many years, and like 6 years actually. And from there, I worked on Borderlands. I worked on Borderlands and all of the DLC. Worked on Battleborn, pre Battle. Sorry, they're all B names, so they're all like super easy to stumble over myself on. So Borderlands 2 and all the DLC. I don't think there was a single DLC I didn't touch. And worked on Battleborn and a little bit on Borderlands 3. Then I went over to Motiga and helped them launch Gigantic. If anyone's not familiar with that one, it's a 5v5 character shooter. Not quite like Overwatch, but it's third person. It's really cool. I love that game. Then I worked briefly for Toys for Bob on Spyro. After that, I worked at Retro Studios, so worked for Nintendo for almost 2 years. Can't really talk about much there, unfortunately. Then I was briefly at Playful Studios before they laid everybody off, and now I'm at Bonus. So that's just a brief overview of where I've worked. Let's see. Yeah, I talked about the games. Unfortunately, I have a bunch of things I can't talk about what I worked on, but there are anything that's been released. So pretty much Spyro is the last thing that I worked on that is actually public. So that's about where my timeline stops, unfortunately. There's a lot of this is the nature of the beast. So getting into this, what does an environment artist do? So just in general, an environment artist is somebody who it can mean a lot of things between different studios. So this is why I wanted to talk about this is it's been a weird nebulous thing for a few years, and I feel like it is getting a little more solidified, but this will change depending on the size of your studio. So an environment artist could do more or less depending on the size. Generally, if you're at a smaller studio, an environment artist will do a whole lot more. And bigger studios, you might do something a little bit more specialized. So that's something to keep in mind. So in here, environment artists generally, for the most part, you're going to be doing some kind of 3D modeling. That will include anything that's pretty much not characters. It could include weapons. It could include vehicles. It, for the most part, means anything that's going to be in the level that isn't a character and not effect. Sometimes you might do effects, but yeah, that's beyond the point. So 3D usually. Sometimes you'll do skyboxes, painting terrain, sculpting terrain, placing foliage. Sorry, not a section more world building, but building things. Then on the other side, you'll be potentially doing world building. Some places will actually separate that. So, like for instance, at Gearbox, the people who make the assets are actually different from the people who actually build out the level and actually place things. That's not the case everywhere. I've been at places where you can do just about anything and everything. And actually, I think that's kind of more often the case, if you go to somewhere like Naughty Dog, you will be extremely specialized. But that's just the nature of the studio, and that's going to be different from place to place. So world building is the placing of assets, lighting, post-processing sometimes you get a lighting artist, sometimes the environment artist does it. So yeah, it definitely depends. And that also includes the terrain sculpting and painting, like I mentioned. You also might be doing materials. That's sometimes when I first started, I didn't really have to do that much. It was mostly making assets and then getting them an engine. More nowadays, I'm doing a lot more shader work. But it is the thing that you might do if you're interested in it. People love it when people can do that. So that's mostly just building shaders, either node base mostly is what I'm talking about. So Unreal, Unity. Let's see. You will absolutely be collaborating with departments a lot, especially the main one will be design. So, especially level designers, you'll want to be very much used to collaborating with somebody else on the level. Most of the time, as an environment artist, you're not designing the play space as far as the player path, the player space. Or like the layout. Usually, you'll come in after an environment. I mean, after a level designer. So you'll go in and make it pretty and help the composition and help essentially drive the player where you want them to go. Um, but that will be a lot of collaboration with level designers, because then you'll probably want to talk to them about where they want the player to go, how important is which path, etc. So, let's see. One other thing that I've had to do a lot of is optimization, and that includes things like when you finally get all your levels built and you're running through them, and then you see that that whatever you're playing it on is chugging, so making sure your frame rate's good. So sometimes you'll be having to go in and figure out why is the level chugging, and a lot of the time it's art's fault. So not always. Sometimes I like to blame effects a lot, but usually it's environment. um, so that's going to be there's a lot there. That's a big topic to cover, but you'll be involved with either reducing poly count on something or trying to figure out where you can help optimize shaders or complexity. Like alpha maps are gonna make things terrible all the time. That's just the nature of rendering. Um, yeah, that's also actually I just remembered that that's actually a really good part of collaboration is on the optimization side. You will also be collaborating usually with like tech artists. So technical artists will help with the optimization side, and usually they're the ones who will go in and help look at all of the stats of the level and help you figure out where the reduction needs to happen. Sometimes it's going to be how many textures you have in the level. Sometimes it's how many meshes. It's kind of just depends on how you built the level. So there's a lot of collaboration as an environment artist just because it's such a big beast of a department, and you affect so many people and so many people affect you. So um, it's really fun. I will say that there are a lot of really fun problems to find solutions for in environment art. And just a general overview of programs that most environment artists know. Uh, Mainly having a 3D package that you know. The good news is it used to not be like this, but it's gotten a lot better over the years where studios used to care which 3D package you used, but nowadays it's a lot less of an issue. I currently work with people who use 3ds Max. We have one guy who uses Moto, and I think somebody on the team I'm sure uses Maya. I'm not sure who, but uh, it doesn't really matter as long as you know what you're doing in any program. You can learn another. I started with 3ds Max. I had to learn Maya for a specific studio, and I have my preferences, but as long as you know how to do one thing, usually there's a way to do something in another. Like there are definitely things that each one does better than the other, just little things here and there. And also Blender is actually becoming a lot more ubiquitous too, and luckily that's a good thing because having something free like that is very helpful for people getting into the industry. So Blender is actually a lot more acceptable, and not acceptable but accepted. It's a lot more accepted by most people. Like I don't feel any if somebody says, "Oh, I only know Blender," that's not going to be a problem for me. ZBrush is a big one. That's one that I know I live in a lot. It's you want to be able to do the high poly, low poly pipeline. Photoshop is actually way less of a thing right now, just because of the substance painter and designer workflows. I really don't use Photoshop nearly as much as I used to. When I first started, we were hand doing everything in Photoshop. But Photoshop's cool. I mean, you might use it. Painter and designer, mainly painter, I would say, for getting started. Designer, you don't have to know getting in, but if that's something that you're really interested in, want to focus on, that's not a bad way to go. Just because designer, not everybody likes designer. It's a different way of thinking, and if you want to just be a materials person, you totally can. Um, World Machine and Houdini are becoming a lot more used lately. I haven't actually worked on a project that used it yet. So I actually only know a little bit of each of them, but not very much. So it's a good thing to kind of poke around in and see if you enjoy it. There's a lot of use for it there. In the industry, there's a lot of uses for it. It's kind of wizardry to me at the moment, so that's something that I'd love to dig into more in the future for sure. All right. So day to day, and this I'm gonna be pretty quick on this, but generally day to day for an environment artist would look like you go into work. Right now, a lot of places are still work from home. My company still is. And so usually just go wherever your office is if you just, roll out of bed and get into your desk. My first thing I usually do is check email and I look at if I have any tasks. So a lot of places will use some kind of task software. So that's ones that I've used. I've used Jira and ClickUp. It's not imperative that you learn it ahead of time, but just to be aware that it is a tracking software that a lot of places they'll use something usually that will help prioritize tasks and help assign them to people. So I will always be checking to see if I have anything that's pending, or usually they'll prioritize things and you'll know if this is a higher priority, you usually start with that first. That's just generally how they do it. I also check I wake up, check email, check my tasks, check my calendar. If I have any meetings, it's kind of sometimes it's sporadic. So, um, and a big thing is talking to people, and I actually have kind of an example of that, of what a task might look like and who you might need to talk to in a second. So, checking in with the team is a big deal. That's especially working from home. Being comfortable with talking to people is really important, as far as if you have questions. That is like a thing. I think that is a thing that took me a while to learn, is not feeling self-conscious about asking questions about what you're working on, and if somebody has a specific request about the thing you're working on, if there's a certain direction that seems something needs to go. Um, and it's so after doing those things, seeing what's on the plate for today, I'll make the art. Whatever I'm needing to work on, I'll be working on that in between meetings. And then also another thing I do quite often is just researching if there's a specific goal or a specific problem we're needing to solve. There are plenty of times where I need to actually go online and research what's the solution for this. Is there a way? Has somebody solved this already? Is there something I can use online, that a solution that somebody's come up with? So that's something that I'd spend my time on. Other than that, it's sometimes documentation, sometimes just building a shader or cleaning up a shader, making sure things are set up so other people can use the shader. So that's also another thing, is making sure the stuff that I work on is organized, and that if somebody needs to come in behind me while I'm making something, or I made something, somebody needs to come in and change something, because that will happen sometimes. And some of this stuff is generally will be the case for any department, but you want to make sure that your stuff that you make is organized enough that if someone comes into it without you there, which will happen, that somebody can come in and understand what's going on. So, that's commenting code, commenting your node structure in Unreal or Unity, or your blueprints, or labeling your Photoshop layers and actually putting those in folders. So, or just your Substance Painter layers. Um, it's a thing that I try to do, and it's very helpful. Don't give somebody a flattened PSD. Is guess what I'm saying. Um, next I have the example that I was talking about earlier. So the let's just say you have a task, and your task is you need to make this exploding barrel, and this is the task that you're given to by your lead or a producer. And so the question is, the I want everybody to think about how many people do you think you have to talk to during the process of making this asset. So the idea would be that the barrel is obviously going to have a mesh, and it's going to have textures, and it's going to have a material. It's going to also have a behavior to it. It's going to explode. It's probably going to damage the player. It might have some physics to it. It's probably going to have pieces that fly off and some kind of effects happening. And that's, I think, the main criteria I would say for this asset. So everybody think for a second how many people you think and who you think you might have to talk to. And I'll give everybody just a second before I move on. All right, I'm going to move on. Okay, so everything I mentioned there, this is about the minimum amount of people if you're working on I would say just a mid-sized studio. So let's just say like a 50 person team. So if I got this task, the first thing I do is I would say, all right, I've got this barrel I need to make. First person I'm going to go talk to is a designer. So probably a level designer if somebody specific requested it, usually it'll be a designer, something gameplay related like this. So I will actually go talk to the level designer first. So whoever requested it. And then unless it's notated in the task, sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, I will go talk to them and say, hey, okay, I'm doing the barrel. Ask him, okay, what's the context? Where are you going to use it? How big do you need it to be? Ask if there's already a block out. Sometimes designers will actually block out a mesh. And it'll be like designer art. So it'll be like a cylinder or a box. And so they'll do that sometimes to block out the scale they need. I'd also ask them, is there a specific color you need? Because sometimes in games you'll have specific interactable items will share colors. The first example on top of my head is something like Mirror's Edge, where all the interactive stuff is yellow, and they use yellow as a color to communicate to the player, and they teach the player yellow is a thing you use, so you can go find the yellow things. So if there's a language like that in the game, it's also good to know that. So ask them the color if there's something important there, and also does it do damage? How intense is this thing? Does it catch fire? What are you thinking if they have any specific requests? So I take tons of notes, so I'll take the notes. Then I also go talk to concept art if there is any concept art for this. Sometimes you will be given a task, especially, it depends on the place. Concept artists can sometimes be a really like hot commodity as far as when you're on a team with concept artists, because sometimes they're off doing something really important and you get this task it's important, but it's not like a crazy for something like this. Like you may not have concept art, so you go ask, is there any concept art for it? If not, you go ask them, is there a vision for this? Maybe you need to talk to the art director, maybe not, and see, can I just find a photo for reference? Sometimes you can do that, especially if you're doing a realistic game. If you're doing these barrels are from Half-Life 2, the ones that I have my example. Those are obviously referencing real photos, so you can do that sometimes. Entirely depends on your art style. Just a quick side note there. If you're working on a realistic game, you can usually use a lot of photos for reference, and you don't need as much concept art. It can be a little bit more difficult on something more stylized or cartoony, where you have to invent what the look of a barrel might be. So if you're in some kind of sci-fi world, there might be a sci-fi barrel, and you have to figure out what a sci-fi barrel looks like. So that can be sometimes a challenge. So it depends on where you are as far as what you use for reference, but even still, even if you're doing something really stylized, it's still good to get real world reference to help influence and give you inspiration and ideas. But that's that side note there. So after talking to concept, if there's any specific requests on the look of the asset, sometimes you decide those, sometimes they're already decided. So it depends. Then you'll also want to, before you actually get, this is all before you get started, by the way. I'd also go talk to effects, see if they already have explosions made, do they have effects already made? Also asking them if this barrel is destructible, how does destruction work in the game system? So sometimes, say in Unreal, you'll have a BP, a blueprint that will be set up for destruction. So you'll have a regular mesh, and then you can have a destroyed version, and it will produce broken pieces. So that's always a good thing to know beforehand. So you know if you're going to need to make a regular version and a broken version and broken pieces. So sometimes that can be a thing. So you want to make sure that you know the full breadth of the asset that you need to make. So after you do all that, then you're also going to want to tell the producer who is on your project, who is keeping track of these tasks, how long you think it's going to take. So, because usually when you get a task beforehand, it's not necessarily going to be decided how long it's going to take. Sometimes you need to do this legwork first, so then you know how complicated this task will be. So then you can actually give a proper estimate. And my advice for that is for sure to, while you're making things, as much as you can, try to time yourself. And this is again, some of this is just can work for any department, this will work for character artists, level designers, anybody really. Is to time yourself and see how long it takes you to do things, and keeping notes on that somewhere. When I first got started, my professors would tell us to make a little notepad on our desktop while we're working on something, and then every day when you work on it, you say how many hours you put into it. And eventually you'll get to the point where you don't have to do that, and you can already tell just by looking at something. Usually you'll want to add time anyway on your estimates. So just getting used to understanding how long it takes you to do something is really, really helpful. And it's because some places will actually really want you to tell them how long it's going to take, because producers use that information to be able to tell how long the game is going to take and how long your milestones are going to take. And that can also inform the scope of the game. If they only have a few months to make the game, they know, well, if it takes us this long to do these kinds of tasks, this is how many of these tasks we can get done in this span of time. So it's really, really great to get used to that. And also asking producers questions of, is this thing needed? How quickly is this thing needed? Is it for a specific milestone? Is it something that we're trying to show off for this demo, for instance? So you'll definitely want to get used to talking to producers too. Let's see. And so I think actually my next slide, yeah, I pretty much covered most of this on this slide. But my general advice here is on tasks like this, it's, don't be afraid to ask questions. Scale, look, usage, time frame. Getting used to coming up with questions is really helpful. References, like I said, those, if you can, actually, I forgot to mention this earlier, is if there isn't a concept and you found some references, but say it's a sci-fi barrel and you have some references, but you're not really sure where to go, you can do like a block out mesh. And sometimes it's really helpful to have a concept artist paint over that for you. And getting used to asking for concept is something that's really good. You probably won't always get it. It's getting used to working without concept is helpful. But sometimes you actually have the ability to request. So that's a good question to ask is, hey, will the concept artist have bandwidth for me to request paint overs or sketches or a quick concept of the thing I'm working on? And sometimes they really can help. And I've definitely had concept artists help me with stuff that I'm having to design myself plenty of times. Um, the other thing I didn't mention at the previous slide was in process of doing this, you always want to get something into the engine blocked out as quickly as possible, just to check to make sure your scale's right, make sure the shape is looking okay. If you're working on a game that has a fixed camera angle, it's exceptionally important to get something in as quickly as possible to make sure you're focusing on the right parts of the asset you're working on. Because if you're doing something that's more top down, that camera angle is so different from first person camera. So you're going to emphasize certain things differently than you would on a first person camera. So just keeping that in mind while you're working. You don't want to just start on an asset and then just tunnel vision and work on it and never test it. You definitely want to do a quick block out, get in an engine, test it, make sure like run around it as the character. So that's definitely a huge thing of advice that I highly recommend following as much as possible. Also, posting updates pretty frequently. So checking in with other departments. That kind of goes into the whole blocking out, getting it tested. You can always say, "Hey, designer, I got this blocked in. Does this seem like it's about the right scale?" They're like, "Cool, go." And so you just keep going. Some places will want you to check in every section. So every section of the development of the asset. So, say you get the high poly done, you'll probably want to post that somewhere, either in the task on Jira or ClickUp, the task tracking software, or if it's still work from home or you're a remote work, you'll want to post it in Slack or whatever messaging program. So, just keeping people up to date of where you are. And let's see. So usually I like to post high poly and show them that, and then sometimes I'll show the bake, but I'll show textures and progress and get feedback, and that can be just really helpful because there might be something that pops up that someone thinks of that makes it better, and it's better to post stuff pretty regularly so things are caught sooner because you don't want to work on something all the way to the end and then find out that you need to go back to the high poly and change something. So that's it's really good to keep kind of checking in. Let's see. Yeah, finish the modeling and texturing. Yeah, I'm still here. Are we okay? Oh, okay. It didn't crash for me. Awesome. Did What was the last thing you guys heard? Okay, I was just saying, oh, get materials. Bleh. You know, like, so yeah, you get it in. If this, like there's something I'm working on that has a really weird material, I might need to talk to effects to figure out, hey, or a tech artist who might be helping develop more complex shaders. Hey, I need this thing to look like it's glowing from the inside. How are we gonna do that? So you probably make the mesh and the textures and then get it in and get the material set up. And then once say we're talking about the barrel still, you got the textures on it, you got all your pieces made, you have the destroyed version, you have the regular version, then you'll want to pass it off. So some places you'll be actually hooking that up into the say it's a destructive BP, you will probably set that up yourself depending on the size of the studio. So the studio that I'm in, there's we're about I think about 50. So we usually, if we know, if an artist knows how to work in the BP, like just if it's like setting up assets, like just putting in a mesh or uh, including the destructive stuff, we'll usually do that. So being somewhat familiar with blueprints is not a bad idea. So at that point, when you had everything made, if you need to set up the PP, you do that. But usually you'll pass it off and you'll give it to the designer and say, have at it and let me know if there's anything wrong with it. Is usually what I tell them. And it's like, let me know if you need me to change anything. So that's generally the gist of like the more logistics side of getting an asset working while working on a team on cross departmentally. uh I think that actually is, yeah, that actually was like the main thing I wanted to talk about. So now we can just open it up to questions. And before we get into questions, I post these are my contact places. So feel free to, at the end of this, if there are any other questions that we don't get to that you want to reach out and ask me, please feel free. My email's fine. I'm on Twitter pretty often. You can message me on ArtStation, although ArtStation is a little. Sometimes it's easier for me to miss those messages because ArtStation's kind of weird about their direct messaging. So Gmail and Twitter are probably the best two. So please feel free to message me, and I'm also totally willing to look at portfolios and give feedback, answering questions about interviews. Man, interviewing would be a really good topic, by the way. I'm just saying, like how to interview for studios, unless that's already been covered. But yeah, I'm totally open to any of that. So yes, please feel free. Um, I mainly I mainly focus on environment, but I do have some experience doing characters as well. Um, so obviously I'm very much I'm open to not just artists reaching out if you have more generalized industry questions or really anything. So yeah, just let me know.
Okay, so yeah, anyone in the audience, if you have questions, please make your way on up to the front. Um, we are happy to take your questions now. So, if you're already ready, I mean, you can come up here. Feel free to. This is the mic that our speaker can hear. So.
Hello. So my name's Donna, and I'm a modeler. And my question for you is, how can you make yourself stand out amongst other environment artists?
Yeah, that's a really good question. What I would say is it's really important on the portfolio side to make sure that you're definitely focused on quality over quantity. That is absolutely a thing that I I don't see it too. Most people don't put too much in their portfolio. It happens from time to time, but a on the portfolio side, you want to make if you have one amazing scene and that's all you have, and you have breakdowns. That was going to be the next thing is actually showing the breakdown. So showing your texture, showing your um, showing wireframes. If you built a modular set, showing all of the pieces in a row, those kinds of things for me really stand out. I see a lot of people who will just show the beauty shot and that's all they show. And while that's nice and you want to have those, for me the thing that I'm going to be more interested in is do you know how to build something performant for a game? So is your topology, does it make sense? Is it you don't have a bunch of like if you have a something cylindrical, you don't have a bunch of like unnecessary geometry that's not you know not contributing to your silhouette. So good unwraps, good packs, you know just kind of showing some of your process too. I think that's really helpful. So that's my number one thing of advice. The other one I would say would be to not be afraid to find find professionals and other artists and asking for advice or reviews. Like doing this kind of thing is really good, and just kind of getting used to talking to other artists. So getting that kind of that networking is really good. I highly recommend. I know social media is kind of terrible But I highly recommend the at least the game dev community on Twitter. At least the people that I've gotten to know are really great, and there's a lot of people who do just portfolio reviews. There's people who will do mentoring, and it's just a really great resource, I would say. So getting used to talking to other artists and seeing what other people are doing. I hope that's helpful.
It does. Twitter is interesting. I know they push for ArtStation a lot from what I've experienced, so I'm, I need to make a Twitter.
Yeah. And I'm not saying you have to necessarily post on Twitter, but
Yeah.
just finding people to follow and seeing what people are doing and interested in. Um, I guess the other side I would say is if there's a specific place you want to work, um, you'll want to kind of, I wouldn't say completely cater your portfolio to them, but say you're wanting to go somewhere that's making really stylized games, you're going to want to have some examples of stylization there and real, for more realism, same thing. Because this is a funny side. Like even though I have 11 years of experience, I'll have my portfolio is extremely stylized, and I'll get contacted by recruiters from like a Call of Duty studio, and they're like, "Hey, are you interested?" And I'm like, "You guys are not gonna like my portfolio. I know you're not." And like it's happened. I had a Rocksteady recruiter message me saying, "Hey, do you want to work for us?" And I'm like, "I love Rocksteady, sure." And okay, and I thought they had seen my portfolio, but as soon as they saw my portfolio, they're like, "Oh, never mind." So just something to keep in mind that there is still that, even though if you can do one, you can probably do the other. If you know what you're doing, you probably can do both. But it's just, yeah, it's just
Okay.
fun. It's really funny to me. So just keep that in mind.
All right. Thank you for coming today. There's other questions, so I'm gonna let them go.
Okay.
Hi there, I'm Tell. Yes, thank you so much for coming and talking with us because this is awesome. I love environment art. I have a few questions, but I'm not going to ask them all. So my biggest one is, what advice do you wish you knew before getting into the industry?
Ooh, that's a really good one. Um, oh my gosh, that's such a good one. I feel like I have 5 million things I want to say. I would say, uh, I guess, well, the one thing I would say is never sell yourself short. Um, and, like know your worth, like know your worth as an artist would be the main one. And, which I know that's super generic to say. I would say, give yourself breaks. I think that's my big one, is that it is absolutely okay. And I know it's gonna be harder, I know, as a student and just getting in, but give yourself the grace to rest, and you don't always have to be making art or doing like on your free time. Like give yourself other things to do than just art, because like there's I feel like there's this really bad pressure, especially getting into social media and seeing people posting personal art all the time. I hardly have a chance to do personal art, and I do have free time, but I just feeling that pressure, like not you don't have to do it. Once you're in, but I know it's a lot harder when you're trying to get in. But even when you're trying to get in, yes, the please rest and please sleep.
It's a big hurdle for me because, like for me, I don't know however many people go through this too, but I feel guilty when I'm not working because anytime I
Yeah.
have downtime, I'm like, I could be working on stuff. I could be like trying to improve myself, and it's hard. But yeah.
I just want to say I still get that, even though I have professional work I can show in a portfolio. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I should have other things in my portfolio. Why don't I have this? Why don't I have that? It's very easy to fall into that, even after you've been doing it for a while. So like, keep that in mind. Like it's
Okay.
deplete. Like just breathe out and let yourself let yourself live.
I will try. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I'll be back in line. I'll be back.
Sure.
Okay. Hi. I'm Chase, and I was looking to ask. I'm actually well. This is a bit more general because I myself I'm not really an artist. I'm more of a programmer myself. But I was wondering, what advice can you give someone on to really break into the industry? Because I've been sending out applications for internships and jobs and whatnot. Because I'm about to graduate, and I haven't been hearing back.
Yeah, that's really tough. Are you applying to are they open internships or are
Yes.
they
At least
they are?
whenever if I see a posting for one accepting interns like entry level positions, I'm submitting my stuff there. Yeah, at least
Yeah.
try.
Okay. Good.
But I haven't been hearing
Yeah.
back.
Okay. So you're at least finding there are listings, so that's good. So you said programming,
Yes.
right? Yeah. What I would say on that is, if you can, so keep submitting. Definitely keep submitting things. If you're, because like you will get ghosted. It will definitely happen. I still get ghosted. Um, what I would recommend is if say you're like have you I mean like something that I do is I have people look over. Are you just submitting like a resume, for instance?
I've got you just submit a resume, cover letter, and a link to my website, my
Okay.
portfolio
Okay. Yeah.
essentially.
So I would say that after a while, if you're not really getting anywhere, if you haven't done this already, definitely having people uh, look over all of your stuff, making sure things are readable and like resumes. Usually they say make your resume like a page if you can. Um, so there's general like resume advice that people might have, or looking up see if there's anything you're missing that might make it. Um, like there's also yeah, like that might make it like harder to read or something like that, but there's also some of these places, this is really kind of sucks, is they use a software to read things that people submit.
Yeah.
I think one of them's called Taleo. So looking up how to format things for Taleo, if they use it, or others, because sometimes they will actually just automatically read off stuff, and if it's not formatted or readable by one of those programs, it'll just get chunked. So that can happen. Um, Another thing is, if you can, I would highly recommend, if there are any Discord communities with people who are in the industry that you can potentially talk to or get just get networked with or mentoring with, that can be extremely helpful, because a lot of it can come down to who you know, and if you can find
I've heard that's
somebody
very
who's
useful. Yeah.
yeah, it's so useful, and it's a little bit easier to get in somewhere like there's somebody who knows you or you've been talking to somebody. I also recommend, definitely, if there are any, because obviously big studios can be a little bit harder, especially if they're like really famous. Those can be really hard to get into sometimes. If there are any smaller studios that you may not have heard before, that's why Twitter stuff. I found a ton of indie studios lately that I've never heard of on Twitter, and seeing if they have openings. Sometimes it can be easier to get into a smaller studio, and that's always a great place to start. I think those are my main pieces of advice on that. But I know it's hard. I know it's very
Yeah.
hard.
And nothing worth having is easy, eh? That's what my
Yeah.
parents tell me.
Yeah, but I mean, you're doing programming. I think you'll be fine.
I hope I'll be fine at least.
I think you
Thank
will.
you.
I think
Thank you very
I
much.
believe in you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is
Hello.
Ian. I'm into level design and environment art. I had a quick question about your work on Spyro. I don't know, hopefully you can answer this type of stuff.
Probably.
So what was the process like whenever you're remaking something that has already been made, but you also kind of want to make it new? How do you strike that balance between like appeasing the retro fans, but also, making something new? Was there like a special workflow for that?
Yeah. Actually, the fun fact I love about the Spyro game was that all of the levels for their collision, they used the original level geometry.
That's really cool.
Yeah,
I like
which
that a lot.
That's what they had decided, and I was like, is Unreal gonna be okay with that? I felt a little concerned, but because Unreal is very fiddly with collision, but it seemed to work. It seemed to work fine. So that was actually the base that we were working off of. So the main thing that we were working off of, we had the original Geo was in, and that's the level we got. It was just passed off to us. It just had that in it, just the original Geo with the textures on it. And so we did have, so I say we because me and one of my fellow Motigan 3D artists also worked on that on the Spyro level I worked on. We worked on it together. So it was a collaboration. So we actually looked at the original Geo, and then we had a couple of mood pieces that were pretty far back that we were able to piece together what kind of assets we were needing to make. And so we broke everything down based on that, and there were already some levels that had been made beforehand, so we had a pretty good idea of what the style was. And there was an art Bible that was really helpful on that. And I feel like they did a really good job. They had I'm pretty sure they had some of the original Spyro people kind of advising on some things, so that was a big help.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But I mean, I think it helped that I grew up loving Spyro, and so I was very excited to get to do it. And I think that was a big help, is that we had quite a few people that were excited about Spyro. So I think having people who know the thing is a good thing. So when we were building things, though, the thing that we had to make sure that we were staying within the collision as much as possible, but still needing to make it not look like low poly fun times. So we would pull out from there. We wanted to make cool chunky silhouettes. Spyro's character mesh was already made by the time I was working on it. So again, it was like easy to, I thought it was pretty easy, honestly. Like, you drop him in and you just look at him compared to what you were making and basing it on that. And then also looking at the original game was a big thing. So I know that's kind of vague, but I hope that's helpful.
No, that was great. Did they give you any like uncompressed original source files or anything, or did they just hand you like a copy of Spyro and be like, make that?
Like oh, actually no, this is the fun thing. So the whole like original level, we had the mesh, and there was a single texture sheet, so that the meshes were using a single texture, but it was everything.
Yeah.
Like it was super low res, very low res, like Atlas essentially is what it was mapped to. So I'm assuming that's what the original game was, is that's just the big Atlas bit. So I specifically worked on Beastmakers, so that was the main one that I was on. Beastmaker's Home, because I know there's a lot of Beastmakers. So I looked at some of the other levels that were being made at the time too, and yeah, they all had that. So it was just like this tiny, I think it was maybe no bigger than 512 of like everything. So yeah, it was really funny to see that.
Well, cool. I mean, that answers my question. Thank you so much.
Ooh.
Hello, I'm Grace, and I'm gonna study more animation and look into that. I was just wondering, like, what was your personal experience, like, getting hired into a AAA studio like Gearbox, and what are some, like, takeaways from that I could apply?
Yeah. So I got into Gearbox as an intern initially. They were looking for interns to help with, I know originally I did collision and light maps because light maps were just now a thing back then. So I'm old. So that I was actually hired, I think in part because as an artist, this may not be as much of a big deal now as it was back then, but I was focused on not only just making assets, but I also had started learning the engine, like learning Unreal.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that was actually a thing that kind of put me above some of the other applicants, is that I knew how to set up materials, I knew how to get things implemented in the engine. And so because there's a lot of people who just focus on making the assets. So having, I think, a little bit of knowledge across not just what you would do day to day to say like make animation, but understanding how to get it into the engine, how to set it up, how to get things working. I think that was actually a big thing that was helpful. Also getting started when you go in as an intern, it's kind so you're not full time. Sometimes you go in as intern or contract. And one of the things that I think was very helpful for me because I did eventually get made full time, but I did actually have to do some legwork myself to get there. I made sure that I was visible to people. I made sure I went and talked to other artists and talked to other departments just to kind of get to know people, which is kind of more of a soft skill thing, but just making yourself visible to people because sometimes like I got kind of put into a closet when I started with like one other person. It was a very cold, tiny room, and I wasn't sitting with other artists. Sometimes they do that, which is not a great thing. Like hopefully when you get brought in as an entry level, they'll put you with other people. So that was a thing that I actually had to like do the legwork for, and I actually kept poking the producer like, "Hey, when we do the next organization, like reseating everybody, can I please be put with other artists?" So you know, not being afraid to kind of like look for things that can kind of help you, not like making demands, but saying, "Hey, like this would be really helpful for me," and also getting advice from, you know, not being afraid to talk to other devs who've been there for advice or help. Yeah, a lot of people are more than happy to help, and it's actually looks really good for you if you're aiming to keep getting better. So I think those are the main ones.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, I'm
Hello.
nice to meet you. I'm Kaylee, and I'm looking to be a concept artist in the future.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I have a few questions that I'd like to ask you, not to take up too much of your time.
Oh, no worries.
How many pieces do you usually have in your portfolio?
Let me see. Like right now, I'm not sure how many I have. I probably have. I have like 10. I don't know how many I have. So my advice starting. Oh, I have more than 10. Never mind. Um, was what I would recommend, like for concept. And I'm not a concept artist, but I've definitely worked with some for sure, and I've definitely interviewed some. Um, I would say as getting in, it would be good to have. I would say like I would aim for five like really good ones. Um, I probably wouldn't like so environment. I could say have one really good environment and break that down, but concept's different. I would definitely say probably five. If you have a specific focus, so if you want to be all around, you might want to have more. If you want to have a few characters and then maybe uh, some environments, if you want to do both, I would, you know, maybe 3 and 3. But if you have a focus of like characters or specifically environments, yeah, that's probably what I would say.
Oh yeah, I'm looking at your portfolio right now. Actually, there's some really cool pieces in here.
Oh, thank you. Have some. It's kind of crazy thinking some of the stuff's old. It's very old. Good stuff made in UDK in here. So,
Are there like any? Is there like anything that you worked on in the Spyro Reignited trilogy that I could like pick out while I'm playing and be like, oh,
yeah.
this one dev made
So the Beastmaker's home. That's the level that I was on. So that's that one. Am I still sharing? I don't know if you can still see it. Yeah. So I worked on Beastmaker's home, and I do have a breakdown of some of the stuff I did. So I made because I did the lighting and the world building on this as well because so I did the tiki arch thing. I did the tiki faces. I did the giant tree in Beastmaker's home. So that was the main level. There might be additional levels that reused my stuff too. I'm not sure. The way they had it working because I was contract on that one. So, and I was remote, so they were like, make the level, and so you do it. So,
Oh, that sounds rough.
Yeah, it was really fun. I was very, very excited to be on that project.
What led you to working as like an environmental concept artist?
Sorry, can you say that again? My dog is freaking out.
What led you to working as like an environmental concept artist? Did you start off your career wanting to be one, or?
I think I started out. I think originally I wanted to. I think I originally wanted to do concept specifically, but I have a 2D background, but our professors advised us. This is gonna sound kind of lame, but our professors advised us like, hey, concept can be hard to get into. Maybe like if you're not already like working on it consistently, which I definitely was not. If you're not already working on it, like probably do 3D. So I actually was originally interested in doing character, but environment was also a thing that was interesting to me at the time. And so getting out and getting into the industry, it can be easier to get in as an environment artist. And so and again, it sounds kind of lame, but like I do really love environment art. Um, I love it, one of the reasons why I love it is there's a lot of problems to be solved, and I love figuring out. It's like a puzzle sometimes, and I really love that part of it. And there's a lot of organization involved. I love that. You get to be creative and technical, so I love those things. But I have actually gotten to do character art also, so it's kind of like you can get in, and then you can also do some cool things, and you know, like actually I was hired to do character I was hired as a character contract artist
Oh, okay.
once, and I was like, oh well, shoot, I thought they wanted me for environment. They're like, no, we want you to do characters. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. So
Thank you so much for answering my questions. These are pretty long lines, so
oh
I'll go
no.
ahead. Alright, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again.
Hello.
So my last question. What's your favorite thing about your job?
Ooh. Okay, I'm gonna give two things because I'm gonna
Awesome.
cheat. I'm gonna cheat.
It's not cheating. It's just more info.
Yeah. I love. Okay, this is gonna be more on like I love sculpting a lot. So I really love sculpting in ZBrush. So that's one of my favorite things. But it's pure. It's like pure creativity. I feel like. The other side of it is I really love working on a team. I can do stuff on my own, but the big thing for me about game development is that you can make something greater than what you could do by yourself sometimes. Like a lot of the time, it's because everybody is going to have their own strengths, and I love being able to help people with my strengths and also having other people with things that I could never do, or I mean, maybe not never do, but something that, oh man, this like I've never done effects, for instance. Like having somebody who does effects, it's wizardry
Yeah.
to me. So I love that. I really love that collaboration side and solving problems with other people. Um, the other thing I do, and I love video games is a big thing. So being able to touch, to even briefly touch something that I'm a fan of can be really neat. Like I never in a million years would have thought I got to like work on a Spyro game. I didn't mention it on there, but I did technically work on Aliens Colonial Marines, and not very long. I mean, not very much. I did a little bit on it, but I technically got to, work on something from the Aliens franchise, which is bonkers to me. And I can say this much, like I got to touch Metroid stuff while I was at Retro, and I'm a huge Metroid fan. And you don't always work on stuff that you're like a fan of, but having those kinds of experiences are really neat. Or hearing about somebody who loves something you worked on. That's another. When somebody tells me they love Gigantic, I get so excited because nobody knows what Gigantic is, and I'm like, yay, Gigantic! Someone knows what that is. I'm so happy. Also, random aside, John Carpenter, famous movie director, The Thing, Halloween, like apparently loves Borderlands 2. He loves the hell out of that game. And I'm like, oh my gosh, John Carpenter, like something I worked on. That's just silly
awesome.
silly stuff, but that's all fun.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up?
Hello.
Hi, my name is Sheridan. I am definitely interested in being an environment artist or a materials artist. And I was
Ooh.
just, yeah, it's
Yeah.
substance. I love substance designer. Not a lot of people do, but
I do too.
I was curious about like what kind of learning opportunities come to junior level artists, and if there's kind of like a leniency as they're going through the learning process, or I guess.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's about the question.
Most places, if they're worth anything, they will be absolutely aware this junior is coming in here. They are here to learn. For instance, I have a really good friend who's at ID, and they are absolutely like the art leads there are absolutely fantastic about that. They are they are, they meet with people. If you have a lead who's a good lead, they will be talking to you about what you like to do, what you're interested in, and they will actually give you time to learn. And that's what should happen. It doesn't always happen. I didn't really have as much of that experience when I first got in. I was teaching myself a bit. I did have there were other artists who did help me, and that they are out there, and it's kind of figuring out who's interested in helping. Some people will just want to have their heads down and just like, just like, I just gotta work, but there are a lot of people out there who are really really great about helping especially new artists. So I you kind of have to like figure out who that is sometimes at a studio, but a lead should definitely be somebody who allows that for sure. And also just talking to other artists I mentioned, like, if you find people on Twitter I say Twitter, but through email, people where people go, ArtStation too. There are definitely, I've learned a ton just from what people post too. Because I taught myself self designer, and I'm definitely not a designer expert, but I'm probably the most experienced substance designer person at my current studio. And I love the heck out of it, but I've had to learn a lot on my own. And I kind of wish there was a substance designer senpai. Like, I wish I had a senpai there. But oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I said senpai, mentor. Sorry. The weeb is showing.
I was like, do you watch anime?
Maybe. I might have a bunch of idol figures up here that you can't see. Anyway, sorry.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
How's it going? My name is Mason. As someone who's like trying to learn environment art, I was wondering, is it more important to focus on like these more game-specific technical things like building modular kits and trim sheets, or is it more important to just make something that looks pretty for portfolios?
Yeah, I would say, like, just starting out, I would definitely focus on props to start with, like things that are like contained, because it can be really daunting to build an entire environment. I know it definitely is. So starting with make something really good. If you haven't already done this, make a few of those, get used to that. I do recommend learning trim sheets for sure. If you have that skill already going in, it can be a big help to getting a job. And but I would say, if you're going to be applying it to a portfolio piece, make it very small. Like, make it contain, do like a corner, and get used to that. So just take it in like increments, because that can get really overwhelming really fast. So yeah, understanding tiling and trim sheets, textile density, those are really good things to know. But I wouldn't start worrying about those until you have a high poly, low poly process first. Like, make sure you have that down pat. You're really comfortable with that, and then you can worry about that stuff, because it's definitely, it's a lot. Environment art is so much.
For sure. But cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm Sarah. I want to be 3D environment artist or modeling. I have a question. Do you have any advice on the transition between a art student to an artist? Since that's near the future for me and it's kind of intimidating and like glooming on me. What's like one good way to deal with that fear?
My first thing would say you're a student, but I would say you are if you're already 3D modeling and you're already texturing, you are absolutely a 3D artist. You are already an environment artist. That would be my first thing. It's like you are absolutely doing the thing. It's uh, having that mindset of never never stop learning for sure. I'm learning stuff all the time, and don't beat yourself up if you don't know something. It is totally okay to not know something. You can always learn, and so keeping that mentality I think is really important. Um, and I think that's the main thing. I know finding a job like that's a whole thing, but like I mentioned earlier, getting to know other artists as much as you can, just online on ArtStation, following people. Those are all really good things just to understand what places might be looking for if you're trying to figure out like what you need to make. Those are really good things. So I think those are like my main two pieces of advice there.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi.
No.
So I am a VFX artist at a local studio specializing in ZBrush, and so it makes me really happy to hear that you also like ZBrush. I just wanted to ask, what is your preferred package or your preferred pipeline?
Preferred package as far as
Like
which
modeling?
program?
Yeah.
My okay. I don't want to start the 3D package wars, but I'm gonna. um, I personally really love 3ds Max. So, but the unwrapping in 3ds Max is terrible. So, Maya's definitely has way better unwrapping. Those are the two I know the most.
Okay.
But for like if I'm doing something really organic, like a tree, a rock, I'm usually going to start that in ZBrush, and then finish that out. I could finish that in Maya. I could finish that in 3ds Max. It doesn't really matter. I probably would prefer to unwrap it in Maya because it's going to be easier. And if I'm doing something very architectural, something modular that needs to snap together, I really like using 3ds Max because the symmetry modifier is like that's my bread and butter all the time. So those are my preferred 3D packages.
Awesome.
Yeah, ZBrush is definitely like that's the best sculpting software. I know you can sculpt in Blender, and I'm sure it's great, but I'm not super familiar with it. So ZBrush's UI is weird as heck. So uh, I've just gotten used to it because I started using it back in 2010. So before that, I was like, we were taught Mudbox at first, which was kind of terrible. I think it's better now. I have not looked back. So, yeah, those are my main two. If we want to talk about Substance Painter versus Designer, I definitely prefer Designer because it's more stable. Painter chugs like a mofo, and I'm like, what is wrong with you, Painter? But I'm coming around to Painter more, I guess. But
Awesome. Thank you.
yeah.
Hello. Okay, so for our next one, we have someone interested in you kind of reviewing one of their projects,
Okay.
which I hadn't totally planned for with this setup. So,
Try it.
is
I
it
can send-
possible? Yeah, if I send you the link, are you able to show it on the screen share?
Oh, I could. I could screen share it.
Yeah, your screen is still up.
It
So
is.
if I send you the link real fast, would that
Yeah.
work for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Which
Can
one
you
do
do
you
the second one?
The second one?
Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.
So some background information about this actually is 3 of us worked on it, and all 3 of us are in this room.
Oh,
So,
cute.
it's really cool. I'm really excited. I can't wait for you to see it. But for those that are here, this is something that a few of us came together to make.
Cute. Okay, so I'm gonna read the description real quick. This is what I always do. I look at the thing and I read the description. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, let's take a look. Okay, cool. Yes, breakdowns. Yes, thank you. Absolutely, breakdowns. This is, you definitely want to do that. Let's see. I assume this is kind of just the process, like blocking it out, then you're kind of adding things and changing lighting. Is that right?
Yeah, this one was, it's
Oh, lighting process.
and-
It's right there. Oh my God,
Yeah.
sorry.
parts and pieces are scattered about on 3 different art stations because we all kind of did different things. But we all split the modeling and then we all came together to put the scene together with all the different objects.
Oh, cute. Well, I'm gonna say it's really adorable. I think it's really cute. I like the style that you guys are going for. It's like the low poly look, like flat low poly look is like really in right now. So it's a good thing. I would say my first critique, it would be these you guys can see my mouse cursor, right? Okay, cool. So these objects here, I think they look really good. I kind of would almost like them to be scaled up a little bit more, so they're a little bit chunkier, like bigger. Like just a little bit. Kind of scale them up a little bit. Also like if you scale these up a little bit more, they'll fill out the shelf a little more. Because of the scale of, I say this because of the scale of the objects in the foreground. So these kind of feel like they're getting a little too small. But it'd be easier to see them, and I think they could. I guess I wouldn't necessarily mess with the stuff on the shelf, but maybe thicken up the books a bit more because the chunkiness that you're going on with the brick and the planks of wood kind of tell me that those books look more like normal scale. That they look more normal. I would want to thicken them up a little bit more. It'd be cool to see just bigger bottles up here too, I think.
So sometimes going for the more aesthetic version than like the realistic scale and keeping everything proportional to each other.
Yes, you said that way better than I did. So yeah, just kind of playing with the proportions a little bit more. I think that's really great. Like the shape on that table is really great. Having the wonk or wonkiness is really good. Having the taper on the leg looks good. I feel like you guys did a good job on where's. So the bevels on it are good and thick, and from this angle, you definitely want to incorporate that as much as you can. You might be able to, like, you have it on the brick. Let's see, there's not that close to the brick. But like this is a good example of the door frame. Those are good chunks, and going through and making sure you're keeping that consistent through everything.
Right.
Good. Like maybe the steps could use a little bit more. Yeah, like the table and chair looks really good, I think.
The brick for the fireplace is kind of too perfect, is what we were told.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next. Well, after I had another thing I was going to say for sure, but yeah, no, I think that's really accurate. Everything, it's all the same. So having them different scale, just different proportions, having some bevels on there would be a big help. The other thing I would say is on the planks. I feel like what you could do is have the planks have a little bit of variation on their color. So some a little darker and a little lighter. Nothing crazy, but just kind of showing that these are different planks. And I wouldn't go too crazy with it because the scene has a good, nice, like flatness to it. And that one you might take or leave. Right. But yeah, just making sure your bevels are consistent through everything.
And I didn't even think of that as changing the color of the wood just so it stands out, because originally they weren't like cattywampus. They were all just flat, and it just looked like one piece of wood. So we had to,
Yeah. The way you guys placed it with them going up and down, that's great. Like absolutely, yes, keep doing that. You might actually do that a little bit more on the brick, kind of just rotate them slightly. And you could also do that with the brick, the color, just changing the color slightly.
Yeah.
This subtly, because I like the flat look. This simple, it's really good. It's easy to read. So yeah, that's all good stuff. The little edges are good. You could cut out little half moon little chunks out of them if you wanted. You don't have to, but that could be fun.
This is one of the first environments that the three of us made, especially as a group assignment. So it was just fun to get that experience. And now we get to show it to you, so it's even more exciting.
And let me just say, way better than my first one. So, you guys are on the right track.
All right. Any more questions?
All right. Well,
everyone?
there's nobody else in line.
Okay,
So
good. I wanted everyone to get a chance.
yeah, I actually do have one more question for you though. My personal interest is in visual effects.
Cool.
So I was wondering if you could kind of talk about the relationship between an environment artist and a VFX artist, and sort of what an FX artist can tell you about a particular prop or something that'll like help get you the information that you need, and like how you like to work with FX artists and sort of how you build trust and a good working relationship.
Yeah. No, VFX people are terrible. No, I hate them. No, they're great. They make things look pretty. So I think what can be helpful is, I guess it's like I'll give this as an example. Maybe this will help answer the question. Like I'm working on something. Let's say I'm working on. Let's say I'm working on something like a fungus that glows. So it's like this little alien little fungus guy that's going to be a prop that's placed like in the level, but we're going to have something special about it. So let's say we're gonna go back to it explodes when you get near it. And that's definitely something that I would need to talk to an effects artist about. And so what I would definitely do is before I made it, I would know it's going to explode before I start making it. So that's generally the hope. So I would go to an effects artist who would likely be helping me on it. Because I do not know, like I know things about effects, but I do not know Cascade. Like at all, or is it Niagara now? I don't.
Yeah, Cascade is the old one, and I think it's been kind of phased out over time with Niagara, I believe.
Showing my age. Sorry. Yeah. So I tried opening it once, and I was like, I do not even know this. Okay, cool. So I would go talk to them and say, hey, I have this thing that's gonna explode. How would you be making the explosions, or what would you need from me to make that work? So sometimes there's something about the mesh that a VFX artist might need. They might need it built a certain way to help facilitate that. Actually, another good example would be like you're working on a computer screen, like a computer that has a screen, and you're talking to them about, we need this, the screen is going to flash and it's going to have text scrolling over it, and I'd want to talk to them about how they're going to do it. Do they need me to separate the UVs, for instance? Do they need this to be a separate mesh? And those are the kinds of questions I'd definitely be talking to an effects artist about. So usually they already know how they'd want to build something like that. Usually when I make something like, don't worry about it, just make the thing and I'll deal with it. That's what they usually do. But I try to be nice and make sure I'm not making their job harder by how I build it. So they're always like, oh, it's gonna be mesh particles. I'm like, okay, I don't know what that means. So, like, that's usually the answer I get. It's just gonna be mesh particles, don't worry about it.
Okay.
So yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Silly.
no, that makes a lot of sense because like I'm in a big class group project right now where we're developing a game, and I'm like the only FX artist, so it like helps to kind of know how that working relationship goes between you and the industry. So it sounds, pretty similar to my experiences in class at
Yeah.
least. So
Make it
yeah.
cool, please.
Wait. No, what? Oh, I take that personally, Discord.
It did a crash,
Oh goodness,
right?
it crashed again. I don't know. I didn't even touch it. It could be OBS. Yeah. Oh goodness, I can pop this out here. Okay. I think we kind of got you back.
I can hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you. Okay, so we should be pretty much set.
Awesome.
But yeah, no, that pretty much answers my question. So
Sweet.
I really do appreciate you answering it at least. Again, there's nobody else in line here, so this actually might be a good opportunity to kind of wrap up for the night.
Awesome.
So yeah, thank you so much for coming out. We really appreciate having you. It's been really insightful, I think. So yeah.
I hope so. I wasn't sure what to cover, and then I thought, I hope this isn't boring. So.
No, it's been a pleasure having you. I really appreciate it. So, all right, with that, I will probably go ahead and hop off the call. Have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and please, everybody, message me if you need any more help or want me to look at something, answer questions, anything. Yeah, so.
A lot of applause over here. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can make sure to pass around your contact information and try and get some people in touch with you if they want to ask anything else. So.
Yeah, I'll message you the stuff that was on that slide too.
Yes, absolutely.
So people can just use their preferred mode.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye.